Imagine this scenario. Tomorrow morning, the Indian government grants Starlink a license. Instantly, anyone in India can buy a Starlink connection. Musk already has thousands of satellites ready to deliver high-speed internet across India. Yet, Reliance JIO is preparing to spend nearly 1,40,000 crore rupees to build something that Starlink already offers. Now, the question is Ambani making a financial mistake? Or does the Indian government know something about Starlink that the rest of us don't? The answer has nothing to do with internet speed or business competition. It is about what happens when another country can decide whether your nation stays connected or goes dark during a crisis. And we Indians learned this lesson in the most brutal way possible. Here is what happened. In May 1999, war broke out in the freezing high altitude region of Kargil. Pakistani soldiers had secretly crossed the line of control and occupied heavily fortified positions on top of the mountains. From those heights, they had a clear line of sight to target Indian supply lines. But for the Indian army, to aim their artillery accurately and locate the enemy hideouts, they desperately needed high precision location data. At the time, the only tool capable of providing that data was GPS or Global Positioning System. But GPS is not a public utility. It is completely owned, operated and maintained by the United States government and the US military. When New Delhi officially requested access to high precision GPS data for Kargil region, Washington flatly said no. The US denied India access to the very satellites orbiting above our heads. As a result, India was left to fight the war without the location data it needed. This single act of denial forced the Indian government to spend billions of rupees to build NavIC, our own completely independent, sovereign GPS alternative. The lesson India learned from Kargil was simple. Never depend on someone else's critical infrastructure during a crisis. The problem is, today we are about to make the exact same mistake again. Because NavIC only solved the location problem. Today, a much larger threat is looming: satellite internet. To understand the threat, we need to look at two recent events: the war in Ukraine and the civil unrest in Iran. When Russia launched its military operation, Ukraine's traditional communication networks were quickly destroyed. To survive, the Ukrainian military became entirely dependent on Elon Musk's Starlink network. It powered their communications, their artillery coordination, and their drone strike. But Ukraine quickly realized that they did not control their own defense network. What happened is, during a critical naval operation, the Ukrainian military launched a fleet of submarine drones packed with explosives to attack Russian ships in Crimea. But as the drones approached their target, they suddenly lost connection. As a result, the drones lost their guidance system and drifted onto the beach. Why? Because Starlink was not activated over the Crimea region. And when Ukraine sent an emergency request to Elon Musk asking him to activate Starlink coverage over the Crimea region, Musk flatly refused. Later, Elon Musk publicly admitted that he had personally denied the Ukrainian military's request to activate Starlink coverage over Crimea for that operation. He also said he feared that a successful strike would trigger a major geopolitical escalation. But regardless of his intent, that moment proved that a private citizen could reshape the battlefield in real time. Now, if you are thinking Ukraine was the biggest warning, wait until you see what happened in Iran. During civil unrest in Iran, the local government shut down the country's domestic internet to stop protests. In response, Starlink terminals were secretly smuggled across the border and activated inside Iran without any local license or government permission. And Elon Musk himself confirmed that around 100 Starlink terminals were activated in Iran. Now imagine how dangerous that is for any government in the world. For us Indians, these two events exposed a double-edged trap. On one hand, if you rely on a foreign satellite network like Starlink, its owner can pull the plug and blind your military during a war. On the other hand, if you try to restrict that network, they have the capability to activate terminals inside your borders anyway, completely bypassing your sovereign laws and national firewalls. So what would happen if India ever found itself on the opposite side of US foreign policy? That's where this becomes dangerous. Because if a conflict breaks out tomorrow, where India's national interests do not align with the United States foreign policy, they could instantly blind India's border surveillance, freeze its drone network, and cripple its wartime economy. Now, some of you might argue that he is Elon Musk. He can go against anyone. But let me tell you, he cannot do that in this case. Because SpaceX is an American company, it must comply with the US national security laws and government directives. Meaning, if Washington ever order restrictions, SpaceX cannot simply ignore them. Now, if you understand this threat, then India's response suddenly starts making sense. And that response is not coming from military, it's coming from Reliance JIO. JIO has officially submitted a proposal to India's space regulator to build a brand new network of up to 1600 low Earth orbit satellites similar to Starlink. And the cost of this project is between 10 to 15 billion dollars. By funding this homegrown constellation, JIO is permanently fusing its corporate telecom empire with India's national security apparatus. If India's future 5G and 6G digital economy runs on a domestic satellite backbone, entirely owned and operated by an Indian company, the country becomes structurally immune to foreign sanctions. Meaning, no future US president and no Western CEO can ever leverage orbital control against New Delhi. But here's the twist. We are not alone in this race. Other major regional powers have realized the exact same danger and they are also building their own sovereign satellite network. First is China, which is currently building their Guowang constellation, a planned network of 13,000 low Earth orbit satellites designed to completely insulate Beijing from Western space dominance. At the same time, the European Union is pouring billions into their own independent satellite system known as IRIS to ensure Europe never has to rely on American private corporations during a crisis. And this rush to build their own satellite network creates a very big problem for Reliance JIO. The problem is, low Earth orbit has a finite amount of physical space and radio spectrum frequencies. And under global space rules, orbital slots are allocated on a first come and first served basis. Meaning, whoever launches their satellite first legally locks up that territory in space. Right now, JIO's planned constellation is locked in a brutal race against time. They are not just racing to build hardware, they are racing to physically claim India's orbital slots and frequency spectrum before the window shuts completely. This high-stakes battle between JIO and Starlink reveals that the low Earth orbit has become the new geopolitical choke point on Earth. Right now, a single private company headquartered in US owns and controls nearly 2/3 of all active satellites encircling our entire planet. And that's why this is not just another telecom project, it is a race to make sure India's future communication remains under India's control. 26 years ago, India learned what it feels like to depend on someone else's satellite. Today, we have no intentions of repeating that mistake. And that's why Reliance JIO is willing to spend $15 billion to build something Starlink already offers. They are spending billions to make sure India never has to ask anyone else for permission to stay connected. If you enjoyed this deep dive into geopolitics, technology, make sure to like, comment and subscribe.